Hello, I'm Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV, your weekly source for news, analysis, and commentary about Wichita and Kansas government and public affairs. We're broadcast on KGPT, that's channel 26.1, also the companion website kgpt26.com. Some of you may know me from my blog, that's the Voice for Liberty at wichitaliberty.org. The motto there is individual liberty, limited government, and free markets in Wichita and Kansas. If you'd like to learn more about the issues covered today or to contact me, please visit wichitaliberty.org. Well, it's budget season for local governments, and so joining me this week are Sedgwick County Commissioners Richard Ranzau and Karl Peterjohn. Peterjohn was first elected in 2008 and then re-elected in 2012. Before serving on the county commission, he was executive director of the Kansas Taxpayers Network. Richard Ranzau was first elected in 2010 and elected in 2014, and this year his fellow commissioners selected him to serve as chair of the county commission. Before elected to the county commission, he was a physician's assistant assisting with orthopedic surgeries. And I do want to let you know that I have supported both of these commissioners' campaigns as a volunteer in various ways, such as door-to-door campaigning and managing voter data. So here, let's join my interview with Sedgwick County Commissioners Richard Ranzau and Karl Peterjohn. Commissioners, welcome to Wichita Liberty TV. So this is budget season for local governments like counties, which you two are county commissioners, school districts, cities, and cemetery districts, and all sorts of things like that. This week, Sedgwick County revealed a recommended budget. So it's not the final budget, it's just the manager's recommendation. There will be two public hearings, and I think the Sedgwick County website has the times and locations of these public hearings. One is in the day, one is in the evening. There's also the budget itself, plus all sorts of other information and video. But a few basics. The budget that you're working on right now is the budget for calendar year 2016. Is that right?
That's correct.
So the county, like the city and the school district, well, not the school district, I'm sorry, the city and the county operate on a budget year that starts January 1st. The state is different. It starts on a year on July 1st, and the federal government on October 1st. So in February, you had your financial retreat or planning session, and at that time, I believe you were presented with the fact that there's going to be a budget deficit this year.
That's correct. We've had a budget deficit. Well, I've been here, this is my fifth year. We've had budget deficits every single year, so we've had to make cuts each year.
Okay, so that's a good thing to bring up, because I think that a lot of press is beginning to pummel the commissioners because of cuts that are described here, and we can get into that in just a little bit. But I think one of the big things, perhaps the source of a lot of the controversy, is one of the goals that you brought into the forefront this year, which is set aside cash to pay for future capital projects. Could you explain, either Richard or Karl, what does that mean?
Well, I'll take that one, because really we're focusing on road and bridges. We have
so these are road and bridges out in the county, not like Kellogg in Wichita.
Correct.
That's owned by Kansas Department of Transportation, but then a lot of the streets people drive on are city streets, so these are just county roads.
That's right. Outside of cities in the unincorporated area, we have over 600 miles of roads and nearly 600 bridges that we maintain. A lot of people don't realize that we have that large number of roads and bridges to maintain. So we have a couple different sources of revenue for this, one of which is the sales tax, and that comes in as cash. But also we have been bonding $4 million a year habitually for, well, many years.
Now, when a lot of people say bonding, they may not really understand what that is. That's actually borrowing the funds, right? And these bonds are then paid off over about 20 years, is that right?
20 years, and so you say you pay principal and interest on a yearly basis. Now the problem is, because of our habitual borrowing, we're now at the point that we're going to pay $5.7 million in principal and interest next year. So think about that for a second. We could actually, if we were paying
5.8 on just the road and bridge portion, county debt,
yes,
we're paying a good deal more than that, but just the bridge portion, road and bridge portion.
Think about that. If we were paying cash, we could actually pay $4 million in cash for roads and bridges and have an extra $1.7 million left over for other things. We have dug ourselves in a hole that I believe is not sustainable, and it's bad financial practice. I wouldn't do it in my personal life, and in fact, I don't think any of the commissioners would do this. And so why have a double standard and do it with taxpayer money? But the problem is, Bob, it even gets worse. So we borrow $4 million a year. We're going to pay $5.7 million in principal and interest. Well, in order to pay that $5.7 million, we take $1.6 million out of the road and bridge fund to help pay that principal and interest. That means we actually only get $2.4 million worth of road and bridge projects on a yearly basis.
Now, Karl, you mentioned a moment ago that this is not the only debt that the county has, so you're not planning to eliminate all county borrowing just for this road and bridges portion.
Think of it as, for viewers out there, Bob, it's like a second mortgage on your home. And we had, except in the county's case, maybe more like the 22nd mortgage, because we do it on an annual basis. These are for 20 years.
Almost like a revolving line of credit.
There are a lot of other county borrows money for other things, and the total county bonded indebtedness has been more in the neighborhood of about $160 million. We're paying close to $20 million a year. It fluctuates a little bit year by year, and $20 million in principal and interest total, and going way beyond just the road and bridges. So we've got to keep this in context, because the road and bridge portion actually is only a portion of the county's total indebtedness.
Now, not all commissioners are on board with this plan. I believe that Commissioner Unruh in particular has been quite vocal about this.
Yes, and it's very frustrating, because he knows he wouldn't do it in his personal life, he wouldn't do it in his business, and it's financially irresponsible. It is appropriate to borrow money at some point, but not habitually like this. For example, in your personal life, you may borrow money to buy your house, but you're not going to borrow money to pay for your clothes and food on a daily basis and then pay principal and interest on that. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So is this an example of something where kind of inertia gets built into this budgeting process and it just continues on forever?
Absolutely. It's kind of the idea of we've done it this way, we've always done it, we just have to keep doing it, and no one wants to rethink this thing. But I think with the new economy, we need to consider some paradigm shifts on some of these things and reevaluate how we're doing things, because in the long run, this really is not in our best long-term interest.
Okay. Well, let's take a moment off our commercial break. This is Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks, and with me this week, Sedgwick County Commissioners Richard Ranzau and Karl Peterjohn. Now, some of the commissioners have, I watched some meetings. You had two meetings this week, a special budget presentation Monday, plus the regularly scheduled meeting on Wednesday. People were using terms like a lot of agencies will be hurt. This is an experiment. It's going to cause calamity, hardship, distrust. He suggested we compromise. Someone else, Tim Norton, as a matter of fact, said we've got a social contract that's going to be shredded by draconian cuts. He mentioned people writing to him about restoring their favorite issue. But I think, Richard, you brought up the point that this is not the first year that Sedgwick County has cut spending and cut positions. I think you cited the 2013 budget, which would have been developed in 2012 when Tim Norton was the commissioner.
Absolutely.
Chairman,
I'm sorry.
He was a chairman. That's also the year they devised a plan to shut down the Judge Riddell's Boys Ranch. But in comparison, this year we have about a $10 million deficit. At that year, we had about $9.3 million deficit. And here's a list of things that he put into his budget. We eliminated 25 positions in general government, 25 positions in public safety, 8 positions in public works, 7.5 positions in human services, and 2.8 positions in culture and recreation. He also reduced the zoo by $256,000, exploration place by $112,000, and there were also cuts in the Extension Council, WATC, and Project Access. So my question was, with all of these cuts and in fact, these are worse than the ones we're making when you look at county FTEs. We're going to lose about 8 to 9 positions at Sedgwick County as compared to over 60 or 70 when he was the chairman. So if you could make these cuts then, even to some of these culture and recreational services, and the sky didn't fall then, why is it going to fall now? What is different now? I mean, the only thing that I can see is that we're under different leadership, and that's why I believe a lot of this opposition from our colleagues anyway is purely ideological.
And I should mention that, Richard, that you are the chair this year, so that's kind of like being the mayor of the county. Your vote doesn't count more or less than any other commissioner, but you do chair the meetings and perhaps kind of set the tone for that.
And if he doesn't, as the chair pro tem, which I am this year, I'm number 2.
There
but
we go.
It rotates. We elect new leadership every January.
Each year, yeah. So a little bit different than being the mayor of the city, but a similar type of role. So the zoo. Now the zoo constituency is quite vocal. They talk about a 5-year funding agreement for the zoo. They talk about budget cuts. But in a conversation with Karl earlier this week, the funding for the zoo for this year and last year is exactly the same.
Well, for the proposed funding for next year is $5,617,889, and the funding that we have for operations for the zoo this year is $5,617,889.
So it's exactly the same.
Exactly the same as proposed. What the difference is the funding agreement, and the funding agreement doesn't take into effect the fact that last year the zoo came to us and said, hey, we've got a huge problem. We thought we were going to be able to raise this money for the elephant project. We need $5.3 million. And a 3-2 majority of the commission basically said we're going to take reserve funds out and give it for the expansion of the basically the elephant barn project out at the zoo. And so we're in a situation where the zoo is receiving significantly more funding than they've ever received in the past, and the argument that there's been a cut is simply based on a projected increase of if we went with the funding agreement, they're looking at almost a 7% increase year over year for 2016 over 2015. And this is a time when our tax base is only growing at 1.5%, and we're really trying to hold the line on county spending in so many other ways. And the argument that the zoo's being cut is I find I've been throwing out these two numbers and asking people, come up with the difference between the same identical numbers of 5.6 million. Having said that, a lot of the funding that we've given the zoo, which is supposed to be for operations and personnel, if they don't use it for that, they've been using it on infrastructure. So we're trying to get more accountability on zoo spending. But as Commissioner Ranzau pointed out, this is not a cut like we had in 2013.
Yeah. So another argument that some of the critics, I think Commissioner Unruh made this point the other day, that the proposed mill levy cut, the cut in the property tax rate, would benefit the owner of a $100,000 home, like $1.30 or something. He said for a $500,000 house, it's only worth $7 per year. And so they make the case, and government does this all the time, that it's just a little tiny bit of money. Well, what's wrong with that type of argument?
Well, you're right. Government makes that argument all the time that it's just a little bit. But when you take a little bit here, a little bit there, at all the different levels of government, it adds up. And pretty soon you have citizens saying, we are taxed too much. Please hold the line. And I tell you, last year when I was running for re-election, the number one issue I heard was people telling me to control their property taxes, don't raise it. And so what we're actually trying to do here is to control the increase and prevent it from the mill levy from increasing because of these minor adjustments. Also, our CFO made it very clear that it is unfair to attribute some of the decisions we're having to make solely to this mill levy adjustment, because there's lots of things. There are hundreds of things that go into our budget that some increase expenditures, some decrease, and it all comes together. It's a multitude of things.
Well, I think the recommended budget book is almost 700 pages long.
That's correct. That's correct. So we're doing what the citizens want us to do, and that's control the mill levy, live within our means. And
if I can jump in here, I feel passionate about this issue because we've had albeit small, but we've had a property tax hike here in Sedgwick County that no elected official ever voted for. It's occurred through technical adjustments and revisions, and I think that's wrong. I think we as elected officials not only should set a dollar amount for the budget, which we do under state law, but state law doesn't allow us to set a mill levy. Mill levy gets set administratively later on in the year, and that's outside our control. We should be setting that mill levy. The commitment of the county was, let's hold the line, no increase in property taxes. We've had presentations saying the property tax hasn't gone up. Well, actually, it has gone up, albeit a very small amount, 0.12 of a mil, but this is a problem with other local units that are receiving property tax funds, and it's a reason why our constituents, we're concerned about property taxes, they're seeing it increases because of the appraisal process, and increases because of these little tiny incremental increases that in many cases no elected official actually voted for.
And what you talk about, my research at the city of Wichita shows that, well, what you mean is the governments kind of have to guess at what the mill levy is going to be, and so we expect that they would make errors. But over the last 20 years, the city has guessed in the downward direction only 4 times, in the upward direction 16 times. So they more often than not, the mill levy creeps up, and no one's voted for that, but nonetheless it happens, and it can be a significant amount over a long period of years.
Yeah, the same ratio has existed since 2010 in the county, Bob.
Okay, well, we're going to take another commercial break. This is Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks. This week with County Commissioners Richard Ranzau and Karl Peterjohn. So we're kind of making some changes, or at least proposing to make some changes in the way the county does things traditionally. You know, we just had a county manager retire who'd been there for over 20 years. Does that kind of open up a little bit more possibility for accomplishing some of these changes?
I think it does. I think it's an opportunity to bring in a fresh face and have them take a fresh look at how we're doing things, and perhaps help us move us forward, change the way we're doing things, control some of our spending habits, and look at ways of providing service as better and more cost-effective manner.
Now, Richard, you have a chart there. I think that's titled Bending the Curve or something like that. It shows what the impact of the changes you're proposing to make this year. What changes will they have on future years? And we'll show that on the screen to the viewers.
Yeah, well, it's very dramatic. So while nobody likes making cuts, it's important to make those decisions. I've heard this from a lot of people telling us to please make those tough decisions just like they have to do in our personal lives. And as our chief financial officer said in the budget presentation, this will have significant positive impacts in our future budgets going forward. For example, next year, it reduces our projected deficit by over 70%. Mm-hmm. The year after, in 2018, it reduces it by 50%, and in 2019, it reduces it by at least 75%, and we're essentially have a balanced budget by then, just by making those changes in this 1 year. Now, obviously, those numbers can change and fluctuate a little bit as we move forward, but this is a significant positive impact on our future budgets.
And if I kind of remember what that chart looked like, before the changes you want to make this year, the deficit was more or less perpetual. Is that right?
Absolutely. And I think it's important to make these decisions, because one of the things we haven't talked about is how our property tax assessment hasn't grown at near the rate of what it has historically. Historically, it's been around 4%, mm-hmm. and we keep making these projections on future budgets based on the idea that it's going to get there, but it hasn't yet. Mm-hmm. In fact, this year we got to the point where we were just hoping for a 1.9% growth in assessed value, but it only grew 1.5%. That right there cost us over $500,000 in revenue, and therefore compounded the problem in this year as well as in future years.
Now, speaking of nickeling and diming us to death, Westar, our electric utility, has a proposed rate increase that public hearings are going on right now. You can attend them, or you can also contribute your testimony online, I believe. And the County Commission took a stance on this. Karl,
Absolutely.
could you explain what does Westar want to do, and what was the county's response?
Westar's proposed a 23rd rate hike between 2009 and today. Mm-hmm. This would be the 23rd rate hike. It would be a 12% increase on residential electric bills. Total $152 million. Actually would include all rate classes, but it varies. The residential rate is highest. Overall, it's a little less than an 8% increase, I believe. And you're looking at a couple more rate hikes are potentially out there too. And even though our county commission has sometimes been divided, we unanimously voted to come out in opposition to higher electric rates. This is hurting our economic competitiveness. It's hurting our ability to retain and retain existing businesses and attract new businesses, Bob. And it's also hurting folks who are on fixed income. There's talk that there's little or no inflation out there, but my electric rates and electric rates from people I talk to, they're going up and up and up. This is part of the national regime's policy of kind of the war on carbon and the war on nuclear energy, and trying to move everybody to more expensive but politically what they seem to support politically correct power is the way I view it. And we need to push back, and I urge everyone who's concerned about electric rates to get in touch with the Kansas Corporation Commission online if they can't attend the public hearings that are underway across the state this week, Bob.
And I think one of the things Westar wants to do is to increase the monthly fixed cost quite a bit. Their reasoning is that about 70% of their costs, they believe, are fixed costs, whether you don't use any electricity in your home or business at all. So there is a small fixed charge right now. They want to increase that, almost doubling it over, I think, 5 years. And I think that some people feel that's punitive to people who use low amounts of electricity.
Well, and it's a disincentive for conservation, because if you're going to get charged more, regardless of whether you're using more power or not, I think that sends that's a step in the wrong direction if they go down that road. I think people ought to be paying for what they use, obviously, but to have double-digit increases for residential users at this time is, in the words of a colleague of mine, not sustainable.
Okay.
And Bob, let me point out that Sedgwick County, and I'm very proud of this, has taken the lead on this issue. And as far as I know, we're the only municipality in Sedgwick County that has taken a position to oppose these rate increases. I've encouraged citizens throughout Sedgwick County that if they have a concern about this, get on the phone, contact your city officials wherever you live, and encourage them to follow Sedgwick County's lead and also protest this rate increase.
Okay, well, very good. So before we wrap this up, I think we're about out of time. What opportunities do citizens have to let their feelings be known on the county's budget coming up?
Well, certainly they can go to our website, and we have a way that they can contact us through there and leave an email.
So that's I think, sedgwickcounty.org, or just use the Google Sedgwick County, you'll get there.
And then on July the 29th, which is next week on Wednesday at 9 o'clock in the morning, they can come to the commission meeting there. We'll have a special meeting. We'll have a hearing then, and they can participate there. And then on August the 6th at 6 p.m.
So is that a Monday?
That is a Thursday.
Thursday, okay.
They'll be able to come to the commission then and also participate in a budget hearing then as well.
So that's at 6 p.m., so that's kind of an opportunity for working people during the day to come and speak to the commissioners.
Yes, and this is something Carl and I have been working on for a few years. We're able to implement this year, and I think it'll be a tremendous success.
A lot of people can't make it during the day. They're working, and having an evening meeting, I think, is a real positive for anyone interested in the budgets that generate the people have to pay property taxes to pay for.
Okay. Well, Commissioner Peterjohn, thank you for appearing on Wichita Liberty TV. Chairman Ranzau.
Thank you, Bob.
That's all for this week on Wichita Liberty TV. I'm your host, Bob Weeks.